The cameras flashed like a storm of lightning across the grand lobby of the Metropolitan Gala, the most prestigious charity event of the year. Champagne flutes clinked, diamonds shimmered, and every step across the marble floor echoed with power and prestige. This was the night when reputations were polished or shattered in the eyes of New York's elite. And walking straight into that spotlight was Adrian Cole, the 34-year-old CEO who had clawed his way up from a modest office cubicle to the helm of a multi-million-dollar company. He arrived tall, confident, exuding the kind of arrogance that came only from believing the world belonged to him. But he wasn't walking alone. On his arm, glowing under the chandeliers, was Sienna Vale, a model barely 24, with sculpted cheekbones and a dress so daring that the cameras couldn't look away. Together, they looked like a magazine cover: glamour, youth, ambition. Reporters rushed forward, their voices overlapping. "Mr. Cole, is this your new partner?" "Adrian, what happened to your wife? Is it true you're starting over with someone younger?" Adrian only smirked, holding Sienna tighter, as if he wanted the entire world to see that he had upgraded his life. Every question, every flash was fuel to his pride. But just outside the velvet ropes, standing in the shadows beyond the photographers, was Elena Carter, his wife. 6 months pregnant, a hand resting protectively on her swollen belly, she stood alone. The satin of her once beautiful dress clung awkwardly to her frame, damp from the drizzle of rain outside. Her eyes glistened, not from the lights but from tears she fought to contain. She had begged him to take her tonight. She thought, foolishly, that this gala might remind him of who they used to be, of the promises whispered on sleepless nights when they were building a life together. Instead, he had dismissed her with a cold smile that morning. "You don't fit the image anymore, Elena. Stay home, rest. You'll only embarrass me." The words had cut deeper than any blade, and now, standing there as he paraded Sienna like a trophy, Elena felt those wounds reopen. Guests whispered as they noticed her presence, their eyes darting between the glowing model and the discarded wife. A few pitied glances, some smug smirks, and many turned away, eager to bask in Adrian's new show. Inside, Adrian raised a toast with Sienna, his voice echoing across the hall. To new beginnings, to beauty, and to the future. The crowd applauded, oblivious or perhaps indifferent to the woman trembling just outside. Elena's heart pounded. Each laugh from Adrian, each flash of Sienna's smile, was a nail in the coffin of the life she had built. She pressed her palm against her belly, whispering silently to the child growing inside her, "Hold on, we'll get through this." But just as she turned to leave, her knees buckled. The weight of betrayal, exhaustion, and pregnancy pulled her down. A gasp rippled through the onlookers near the entrance. A security guard rushed toward her, steadying her before she hit the floor. Murmurs spread. Some guests craned their necks to see what the commotion was about. For a fleeting moment, Adrian glanced over. His eyes landed on Elena. But instead of rushing to her, instead of shame or concern, he simply tightened his grip on Sienna's waist and turned away, whispering something into her ear that made her laugh. The humiliation was complete. The man who once promised Elena forever had not only abandoned her, but erased her publicly. Yet, as the night stretched on, fate was preparing a stage that Adrian Cole could never control. Because this wasn't Elena's ending. It was the brutal beginning of something he would never see coming. And the next time Adrian saw her, it wouldn't be from the shadows. It would be in a place he could never reach, the VIP section where he no longer belonged. Before the cold stares, before the cameras, before the cruelty of a man who treated her like a burden, there was a story that felt like a fairy tale. Elena Carter had been 22, fresh out of college, juggling 2 part-time jobs to pay off her student loans. She worked days at a small publishing house and nights as a waitress at a neighborhood bistro. Her world was ordinary, but her dreams were endless. Adrian Cole walked into that bistro one rainy evening, his suit damp from the storm, his tie loosened as though the weight of the world hung on his shoulders. At the time, he was no CEO. He was just another ambitious man, clawing his way up the corporate ladder. His paycheck barely enough to cover his rent. But he carried himself with a fire that caught Elena's attention the second she placed a cup of coffee in front of him. Their first conversation wasn't about business or ambition. It was about books. She noticed the worn paperback sticking out of his briefcase and smiled. "You read Fitzgerald?" she asked, teasing gently. He smirked. "Trying to remind myself that dreams don't always have to die." She laughed, and in that moment, something unspoken bloomed between them. Weeks turned into months, and their bond deepened. Adrian adored Elena's sincerity, the way she looked at life not as a battlefield but as a garden to be nurtured. She admired his determination, his ability to push through every obstacle with sheer willpower. They were young, poor, and often exhausted, but they had each other. Dinner was often instant noodles, date nights were long walks in the park, and gifts were handmade, notes scribbled on napkins, promises whispered under starlit skies. By the time Adrian proposed, there was no diamond ring, just a silver band he saved up for by skipping meals. Elena didn't care. She said yes through tears of joy, believing she had found the man who would protect her heart forever. Their wedding was small, just a gathering of close friends at City Hall. But when he kissed her and whispered, "We'll build everything together," she believed him with all her soul. For years, they did build. Brick by brick. Elena worked tirelessly to support them, taking on side gigs to cover bills while Adrian pursued his dream of starting his own company. She believed in him when investors laughed, when banks turned him away, when others told him he wasn't cut out for the cutthroat world of business. When Elena discovered she was pregnant, she trembled with both fear and joy. Adrian had seemed thrilled, lifting her off the floor and spinning her around. "We're going to be a family," he said, his eyes shining with pride. For Elena, it was the happiest moment of her life. She imagined a future filled with lullabies, bedtime stories, and a little one who would know the love she and Adrian shared. But slowly, cracks appeared. Success changed Adrian. The man who once whispered promises under the stars began spending nights at the office, claiming deals couldn't wait. He traded their modest dinners for lavish client outings, their shared dreams for boardroom conquests. The silver band on Elena's finger felt heavier each day, as if reminding her of vows he was forgetting. Still, Elena clung to hope. She believed the man she fell in love with was buried under the weight of power and ambition. She cooked his favorite meals, left notes in his briefcase, and prayed their child would remind him of the simple joys they once cherished. But what she didn't realize was that Adrian wasn't just drifting away. He was preparing to replace her. And the night she discovered the truth would shatter the last illusion of the love she thought would last forever. At first, the changes were subtle. Elena told herself they were just growing pains, the natural struggles of a couple balancing ambition with family. Adrian had always been driven, and now, with his company gaining traction, it seemed normal that he spent long nights at the office. She reassured herself that he was building something for their future. But soon, those late nights became endless. Dinner plates sat untouched on the kitchen table. The soft glow of candles Elena lit went unnoticed. Adrian came home past midnight, smelling of expensive scotch and perfume that wasn't hers. When she asked, he brushed it off with a wave of his hand. "Clients, Elena, you wouldn't understand. This is how the game is played." At first, she believed him, but then came the comments. Small, cutting remarks that sliced deeper than he realized, or perhaps deeper than he cared. "You've really let yourself go. Maybe you should do something with your time besides reading baby books. Do you even know how to talk to the kind of people I meet now?" Each word was a brick in the wall growing between them. Elena felt herself shrinking, silencing her laughter, biting back tears, convincing herself not to argue. She remembered the man who once adored her quirks, who called her his anchor. Where had he gone? Pregnancy made her more vulnerable. Her body was changing, her emotions raw, and all she wanted was comfort. Instead, Adrian treated her condition as an inconvenience. When she asked him to attend a prenatal appointment, he rolled his eyes. "Do you know how many deals I'm juggling? You'll be fine without me." He was never there when the doctor placed the stethoscope on her belly. He never saw the flicker of their baby on the ultrasound screen, the tiny miracle that made her cry with joy. She sat in the sterile clinic alone, surrounded by couples holding hands, and felt the sharp sting of abandonment. The nights were the hardest. She would lie awake in their king-sized bed, her hand resting on her stomach, whispering lullabies into the silence. Sometimes Adrian didn't come home at all, sending a curt text, staying at the office. Elena tried to believe it, but deep down her instincts screamed otherwise. One evening, desperate to feel close again, she cooked his favorite meal, roast chicken with rosemary, the same dish she had made on their first anniversary. She set the table with candles, dressed carefully, even though her swollen feet ached. She waited. Hours passed. Finally, the sound of keys at the door filled her with relief. Adrian stepped in, but his face hardened at the sight of the effort she had made. "What is this? A dinner party for two? I told you I was busy." "Adrian," she pleaded softly, "I just wanted us to have a moment together." His jaw tightened. "You don't get it, Elena. You never will. You're stuck in this small world. I'm moving forward and you're just holding me back." Her heart clenched. The man who once said they'd build everything together now saw her as an anchor dragging him down. As tears welled in her eyes, Adrian walked away, his phone buzzing with a new message. He didn't even look back. Elena stared at the flickering candles until the wax burned low, whispering to herself, "I'll hold on. For the baby, I'll hold on." But deep inside, she knew the cracks weren't just forming, they were breaking wide open. And soon, what lurked in the shadows would make it impossible to deny that Adrian Cole was no longer the man she had married. The breaking point didn't come in silence. It came with a spectacle. Adrian had been growing more distant, and Elena clung to every shred of hope that the man she once knew was still buried beneath the arrogance. But nothing could prepare her for the night when he ripped away the last thread of her illusions. It was a Friday evening, when Adrian insisted they attend a networking party hosted by one of his investors. Elena, 6 months pregnant, was hesitant. Her body ached, her feet swollen, and her emotions fragile. But Adrian's tone left no room for refusal. "Try to look presentable," he snapped before leaving the house. "This is important." Elena dressed carefully, choosing a soft navy dress that framed her growing belly. She hoped, prayed, that perhaps tonight they could find a spark of their old connection. She imagined him placing a protective hand on her back, introducing her proudly as his wife. For once, she wanted to feel like she belonged in his new world. But when they arrived at the glittering rooftop venue, she instantly knew she was out of place. The women wore gowns that clung to every curve, their jewelry blinding under the lights. Men in tailored suits whispered about billion-dollar mergers. Elena felt small, her simple dress a stark contrast to the extravagance around her. And then came the moment that shattered her completely. As the crowd buzzed with chatter, Adrian stepped to the center of the terrace. He raised his glass, drawing attention with the ease of a man who knew the world revolved around him. Elena stood by his side, her heart pounding with nervous pride. Perhaps he would finally acknowledge her. Let the world see that she was part of his story. But instead his hand slid not toward her, but toward another woman. Sienna Vale emerged from the crowd, her crimson gown hugging her figure like liquid fire. The whispers began instantly. Adrian pulled her close, his arm tight around her waist, and with a smirk he spoke words that cut Elena to her core. To new partnerships, to beauty, to the future. The crowd erupted in applause, cameras flashed. Sienna tilted her head and kissed his cheek, while Adrian basked in the attention. Elena stood frozen, her glass trembling in her hand. She felt every eye dart between her and the glamorous model. The whispers grew sharper, crueler. "Isn't that his wife? She looks awful next to the new girl. Poor thing, she should have stayed home." Tears stung her eyes, but she forced herself to stay upright, refusing to collapse in front of them. She pressed her palm against her belly, whispering silently to her unborn child, "Hold on, we'll get through this." Adrian didn't even look at her. To him, she had already disappeared. Later that night, when they returned home, Elena finally confronted him. Her voice shook, but her words were steady. "How could you humiliate me like that? I'm your wife, Adrian, the mother of your child." He poured himself a drink, not meeting her gaze. "You don't understand. You don't fit my life anymore. You're baggage. I need someone who can stand beside me in the spotlight." Her heart broke with every syllable. "So that's it? You're throwing me away?" He smirked coldly. "Yes, and you should be grateful I'm letting you go. You'll only hold me back." The finality of his words crushed her. She realized then that the man she had once loved, the man who held her hand under the rain and promised forever, no longer existed. She turned away, tears streaming down her face, her body trembling with both rage and sorrow. Her world had collapsed, but the ruins of that night would become the foundation of a strength she never knew she had. And one day, Adrienne Cole would regret ever calling her baggage. The apartment that once felt like a home was now a cage of memories. Every corner whispered of the life Elena thought she had, a life built on promises that had turned to dust. The soft blue curtains she had chosen together with Adrienne fluttered gently in the breeze, mocking her with the illusion of peace. The crib in the corner of their bedroom, half assembled, stared back at her like a cruel reminder she was preparing to raise their child alone. Nights were the hardest. The bed felt like an ocean, empty and cold without Adrienne's presence, though even when he had been there, his warmth had long disappeared. Elena lay awake, one hand resting on her swollen belly, the other clutching the silver wedding band she could no longer bear to wear on her finger. She whispered softly into the darkness, speaking to the child growing inside her. "It's just you and me now. I promise I'll protect you, no matter what." But the silence swallowed her words, leaving her with nothing but the sound of her own sobs. During the day, she tried to keep herself busy. She cooked small meals she could barely eat. She folded tiny baby clothes she had bought with what little money she had set aside. She forced herself to smile at neighbors who asked about the pregnancy, hiding the truth behind polite nods. But when the door closed, her mask fell, and the loneliness consumed her again. Adrienne, meanwhile, was nowhere to be found. Days passed without a call, without even a message. When she reached out, desperate for some acknowledgement, his replies were cold, clipped. "You'll be fine. Stop being dramatic. I'm busy." Each word was another dagger in her chest. She realized then that she had lost him not just as a husband, but as the father of her child. Her health began to suffer. The stress carved deep shadows under her eyes. She fainted once in the kitchen, pathetic, waking up on the floor with a bruised cheek and the terrifying thought that she could have lost the baby. The doctor warned her sternly, "Mrs. Cole, you need to rest. Stress is dangerous for both you and the child. You must take care of yourself." She nodded, but how could she explain that rest was impossible when her soul was being torn apart? One evening, unable to contain her grief, she packed a small bag and walked aimlessly through the city streets. She ended up at the old bistro where she and Adrienne had first met. The place was alive with laughter and music, but to Elena it felt like a ghost town. She sat at a corner table, tracing the rim of her water glass, and remembered the young man who once looked at her as though she were the only woman in the world. She cried silently, shoulders shaking, while the waiter avoided her table, unsure how to comfort a woman whose sorrow hung heavy in the air. When she finally returned home, the apartment was darker than ever. Adrienne had left a note on the counter. Not an apology, not a promise, just a blunt statement. "Don't wait up." She collapsed on the couch, clutching her belly, her tears soaking the fabric. For the first time, she truly felt abandoned, invisible, erased. Yet, beneath the crushing weight of despair, a small spark flickered. A quiet, stubborn whisper inside her heart. She would not let Adrienne's betrayal destroy her completely. Not while her child's tiny heartbeat still echoed inside her. It was a gray Saturday afternoon when the knock came at the door. Elena was curled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, sipping lukewarm tea as her baby shifted inside her belly. She wasn't expecting anyone. For a moment, her heart leapt. Was it Adrienne? Had he finally come home to apologize, to hold her, to say he still cared? But when she opened the door, it wasn't Adrienne. It was Sienna Vale. The young model stood there in oversized sunglasses, a designer coat draped carelessly over her shoulders, the scent of expensive perfume filling the hallway. She didn't wait for an invitation. She simply pushed past Elena, clicking her heels against the hardwood floor as if she owned the place. Elena's stomach tightened, not just from pregnancy, but from dread. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling. Sienna removed her sunglasses slowly, revealing eyes that sparkled with mockery. "Relax, sweetheart. I just came to talk, woman to woman." Elena's hands instinctively went to her belly. She wanted to slam the door, to scream, but she forced herself to stay composed. "There's nothing for us to talk about." "Oh, I think there is," Sienna replied smoothly, glancing around the apartment with thinly veiled disdain. You see, Adrian doesn't like loose ends, and well, you're the biggest loose end in his life right now. The words stung. Elena's throat tightened, but she refused to let tears fall in front of this woman. I'm his wife, she said firmly, and I'm carrying his child. Sienna smirked, her lips curling into a cruel smile. Yes, but let's be honest, do you really think that matters? Adrian doesn't want a tired, swollen housewife dragging him down. He wants a partner who can shine next to him. That's me. She moved closer, lowering her voice to a whisper dripping with venom. You were the stepping stone, the practice run. Now he's ready for the real thing. Elena's heart pounded. She wanted to shout, to defend herself, but the words caught in her throat. Every cruel sentence echoed the fears that had kept her awake at night. Sienna straightened, pulling a small envelope from her bag and tossing it onto the coffee table. That's a check. Enough to cover whatever you need. Consider it a gift from me. Take it, disappear, and stop embarrassing yourself. Stop embarrassing him. Elena looked down at the envelope as if it were poison. She didn't touch it. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, fury burning through her grief. You think money will erase me? Erase this child? She asked, her voice shaking. Sienna tilted her head, feigning pity. Oh, darling, the world erases women like you every day. You're nothing but a sad story. Trust me, when the cameras are on us, no one even remembers you exist. The cruelty was unbearable. Elena felt her knees weaken, her vision blur. But then, something inside her shifted. She straightened her spine, meeting Sienna's gaze with a strength she didn't know she had. You may have him now, Elena said quietly, but you'll never keep him. Men like Adrian don't change. They just trade in one mistake for another. And one day you'll know exactly how it feels to be standing where I am. For the first time, Sienna's smirk faltered. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. She quickly grabbed her sunglasses, sliding them back on. Enjoy your little pep talk, she sneered. But remember, Adrian belongs to me now. With that, she swept out the door, leaving behind the stench of arrogance and the envelope of pity. Elena sank onto the couch, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her hands cradled her belly as she whispered, I won't disappear. Not for him, not for her. We will survive this. And for the first time, the pain began to harden into something else. Resolve. The days after Sienna's visit were some of the darkest of Elena's life. Her mind replayed the cruel words over and over, echoing through the silence of the apartment. You're nothing but a sad story. The phrase burrowed deep into her chest like a thorn, each repetition pressing harder until she could hardly breathe. She tried to stay strong. She cooked simple meals, folded baby clothes, even whispered lullabies into the unfinished nursery. But her body betrayed her. The constant stress gnawed at her health. Sleep slipped through her fingers, replaced by restless tossing and the sting of silent tears. One late evening, as rain hammered against the windows, Elena stood in the kitchen trying to fix herself a cup of tea. Her hands shook as she reached for the kettle. A sudden wave of dizziness crashed over her and the room spun violently. She grabbed the counter, but her strength gave out. The mug shattered on the floor as Elena collapsed. Her last thought before everything went black was of the tiny heartbeat inside her. Please, baby, hold on. When she woke, the sharp scent of disinfectant filled her nose. White walls, beeping machines, a nurse's calm voice floated above her. Mrs. Cole, you're awake. Don't move too quickly. Elena blinked, panic seizing her chest. The baby? She croaked. The nurse smiled gently, placing a hand on her arm. Your baby's heart is strong, but you need rest. Too much stress can put both of you at risk. Tears of relief spilled down her cheeks, though the fear lingered like a storm cloud. She was alive, and so was her child. How close had she come to losing everything? The doctor entered, stern yet compassionate. He held up her chart, his voice steady but firm. Mrs. Cole, your blood pressure is dangerously high. This isn't just about you anymore. If you don't remove yourself from stressful situations, you could lose this baby. Do you understand? She nodded, her throat tight. Remove yourself from stress. How could she, when the source of her pain was her own husband? That night, alone in the hospital bed, Elena stared at the ceiling. Machines beeped softly, nurses walked past her door, and the city outside buzzed with life. She felt like the world had moved on without her. No calls came from Adrian, not even a message. She checked her phone, praying for a sign of concern, a shred of humanity. Nothing. Only silence. Her hands cradled her belly, and she whispered through tears, "I promise, little one, I'll fight for you, even if I have to fight alone." The following morning a nurse brought her a tray of breakfast and set it by the bed. "Do you have family who can help you, Mrs. Cole?" she asked kindly. Elena hesitated. Her parents were gone. She had no siblings. Adrian had become a stranger. For the first time she realized just how isolated she truly was. "No," she whispered, "it's just me." The nurse gave her a sympathetic smile. "Then you need to be twice as strong, not just for yourself, but for that baby." As Elena ate in silence, she felt something shift deep inside her. The tears still fell, but underneath them a stubborn determination began to form. She couldn't rely on Adrian, and she couldn't let Sienna's cruelty define her. If she wanted her child to have a future, she had to find her strength. And though she didn't know it yet, someone was about to step into her life. Someone who would remind her she wasn't as alone as she believed. Because even in her darkest hour, an unexpected ally was waiting in the shadows. Elena was discharged from the hospital 2 days later with strict instructions. No stress, plenty of rest, and a follow-up appointment in 1 week. But as she stepped out into the cool autumn air, her reality felt heavier than ever. Her health was fragile, her marriage was shattered, and her future seemed uncertain. She wrapped her coat tighter around her, one hand instinctively resting on her belly. She flagged down a cab, but before she could step inside, a voice called out from behind. "Elena?" She turned. Standing near the hospital entrance was a man she hadn't seen in years. Marcus Blackwood, tall, broad-shouldered, with piercing gray eyes that seemed to see more than he let on. Marcus was a figure of quiet power. The world knew him as a reclusive billionaire, the kind of man who avoided cameras and headlines but controlled half the city through his investments. Elena knew him differently. He had been a friend of her late father, a presence from her childhood who always treated her like family. "Marcus?" she whispered, stunned. He approached with steady strides, concern etched across his face. "I heard what happened. I came as soon as I could." Elena's throat tightened. "How did you? Let's just say I have people who still care about you," he said softly. "And Elena, you don't look well. You shouldn't be leaving alone." The words nearly broke her. For weeks she had carried the weight of abandonment. To hear someone care, it was almost too much. Tears welled in her eyes, and Marcus placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Come on, let me take you home." Inside his sleek black car, Elena sat quietly, her hands folded over her stomach. Marcus didn't press her. He simply gave her space until she finally whispered, "He doesn't care anymore, Marcus. Adrian, he's with someone else. And I?" Her voice cracked. "I don't know how to do this alone." Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "You're not alone. Not anymore. I promised your father I'd look after you if you ever needed me. I should have stepped in sooner." Elena turned toward him, her eyes wide. "My father?" Marcus nodded slowly. "He didn't want his wealth or his name to define you. He wanted you to live freely, to find love without expectations. That's why so few people know who you truly are. But Elena, you are not powerless. You are not without resources, and you are certainly not someone who can be erased by a man like Adrian Cole." The revelation hit her like a bolt of lightning. For so long, she had seen herself as small, insignificant, discarded. But Marcus's words reminded her of a truth buried beneath years of sacrifice. She came from strength, from legacy. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I don't feel strong, Marcus. I feel broken." He leaned closer, his voice steady and resolute. "Strength isn't about never breaking. It's about standing back up after you do, and I will help you stand." For the first time in weeks, Elena felt the faint spark of hope. She wasn't entirely alone. As Marcus's car pulled up to her apartment, paparazzi lights flashed across the street, cameras snapping frantically as Adrian and Sienna strutted into a nearby restaurant. Elena froze, the humiliation rushing back, but Marcus gently touched her arm. "Don't look at them," he murmured. "Look forward. Because soon, Elena, they'll be the ones looking up at you." And in that moment, for the first time since her world collapsed, Elena began to believe she could rise again. The night after Marcus's revelation, Elena lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The city hummed outside her window, a alive with lights and noise, while her own world felt suspended between collapse and rebirth. Her body ached, her heart carried invisible wounds, and yet Marcus's words echoed in her mind. "You are not powerless." But doubt gnawed at her. She was 6 months pregnant, exhausted, and had spent weeks drowning in tears. Could she really fight back? Could she really rise against Adrian, the man who had once been her whole world, but now stood as her greatest enemy? She pressed her hand against her belly, feeling the faint kick of her child. A surge of emotion rippled through her. This little life depended on her. She could not crumble. Not now. But another voice inside whispered cruelly, "What if Marcus is wrong? What if I am too weak?" The battle raged within her. In the morning, Marcus called to check on her. His tone was calm, reassuring, but Elena's answers were hesitant. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted softly. "I don't know if I can face him, face them. Adrian destroyed me. Sienna humiliated me. What if I fail?" Marcus's reply was steady, firm. "Elena, failing isn't falling down. It's refusing to get up. Adrian counts on you staying silent. Sienna counts on you disappearing. Do you really want to give them what they want?" The words stung because they were true. Later that day, Elena stood before the mirror in her bedroom. She hardly recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hair unkempt, her body weighed down by pregnancy and despair. But beneath the surface, she saw flickers of the woman she used to be, the woman who laughed easily, who believed in love, who supported Adrian when no one else did. That woman wasn't gone, she was buried. Elena whispered to her reflection, "You can't fade, not anymore." Still, fear clawed at her chest. What if she stepped forward and the world laughed at her again? What if she showed up at those glittering galas only to be mocked, pitied, erased? She pressed her forehead to the cool glass of the mirror, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Marcus. "I believe in you. But more importantly, you need to believe in yourself." The simplicity of those words broke something inside her. She sat on the edge of the bed, sobbing quietly, but this time it wasn't the hopeless sob of despair. It was the painful release of a woman realizing she had a choice. She could let Adrian and Sienna write her ending, or she could write it herself. That evening, Elena opened the box of baby clothes she had folded weeks ago. Tiny socks, soft blankets, a little knitted hat. She held them against her chest, imagining the small, perfect face that would one day wear them. A fierce protectiveness surged within her. This child deserved a mother who fought back. She wiped her tears, her voice steady now. "For you, my love, for you I will rise." At that moment, the decision crystallized. She would not fade into the background. She would not be erased. Adrian had underestimated her, and Sienna had mocked her. But they had both forgotten one truth. Nothing is stronger than a mother fighting for her child. And soon, Elena Carter would begin a transformation that neither of them could stop or survive. Elena's decision to fight back was only the first step. The next would be harder. Transforming herself from the broken woman Adrian discarded into someone who could command the respect of the very world that had mocked her. Marcus knew this. The morning after her moment of resolve, his car pulled up outside her apartment. "Get in," he said with quiet authority. "Today we start rebuilding." She hesitated. "Marcus, look at me, I'm a mess." He studied her for a long moment. "No, Elena, you're not a mess. You're raw material, and raw material in the right hands becomes something unbreakable." Those words carried her through the day as Marcus introduced her to his world. First, a discreet stylist, renowned for dressing diplomats' wives and movie stars who needed to reinvent themselves. The woman's sharp eyes studied Elena, not with judgment, but with vision. "We're not here to erase you," she said firmly. "We're here to reveal you." Hours passed in a whirlwind of fabric, mirrors, and decisions. Elena slipped into gowns that shimmered like moonlight, tailored suits that made her stand taller, and elegant maternity dresses that celebrated her pregnancy rather than hiding it. For the first time, she saw herself not as a victim but as a woman of quiet power. Next came the hair and makeup. The stylist swept away the shadows of exhaustion, revealing features Elena had long forgotten were beautiful. Her hair framed her face in soft waves, her lips curved in a subtle smile. Her eyes, once dulled by grief, now glowed with determination. When she looked in the mirror, she gasped softly. It wasn't vanity, it was recognition. "I remember her," she whispered. The woman I used to be. Marcus stood behind her, his reflection steady in the glass. No, he corrected gently, she's stronger now, because she survived. The transformation wasn't just physical. Marcus arranged private lessons with a mentor in public speaking and etiquette, an older woman who had once advised senators' wives. Elena learned how to walk into a room and own it without a word, how to let silence be more powerful than shouting, how to use her presence as armor. At first, Elena stumbled. Her nerves betrayed her, her hands trembled. But with every session, she grew steadier. She wasn't pretending anymore. She was remembering the strength her father once told her she carried, and the resilience her child demanded she summon. Then came the moment of truth, stepping back into society. Marcus secured an invitation to a private charity luncheon at a rooftop garden, attended by the very people who once whispered about her humiliation. Elena almost refused, fear threatening to choke her. But Marcus reminded her, this is just the beginning. Walk in, and let them see you. That's all you need to do. When Elena arrived, conversations faltered, heads turned. The whispers began, but this time they were different. No one saw the broken woman abandoned by her husband. They saw elegance, they saw grace, they saw a woman who belonged. She smiled politely, moved with confidence, and let the curiosity wash over her without flinching. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about reclaiming her dignity, piece by piece. As the luncheon ended, one woman leaned over to whisper, "Isn't that Adrian Cole's wife? She looks radiant." Elena heard it, and for the first time in months, the words didn't sting. They healed, because this was only the beginning of her return. And Adrian Cole had no idea what was coming. The charity luncheon had been a small step, but it set the stage for something bigger. Elena had walked in as the woman everyone pitied, and walked out as the woman everyone whispered about. She didn't crumble under the stairs, she owned them. And the effect rippled quietly through New York's high society. Marcus knew the timing was ripe. A few days later, he called Elena with a simple message. "There's a private dinner tonight. Intimate. Only 12 people. They are the kind of people who move the city. You should be there." Elena's heart pounded. "Marcus, I don't belong in that room." "Yes, you do," he replied calmly, "more than Adrian ever did. It's time the world remembered who you really are." That evening, Elena dressed in a sleek black maternity gown that flowed with understated elegance. When she walked into the penthouse dining room, crystal chandeliers sparkled above, and the skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. The atmosphere hummed with quiet power. The guests were names she recognized from headlines: bankers, philanthropists, media moguls. At first, their eyes narrowed in surprise. Adrian's abandoned wife? Pregnant and alone? But Marcus guided her forward, introducing her not as a victim, but as Elena Carter, the daughter of a respected family legacy, a woman of intelligence and quiet strength. The first few minutes were excruciating. Elena felt the weight of every glance, every judgment. But then a silver-haired woman leaned closer. "I remember your father," she said warmly. "He had vision and integrity. I see that same fire in you." The words unlocked something inside Elena. She smiled, not forced, but genuine. Conversation flowed. She spoke about literature, about the importance of family, about the charity causes she believed in. Her voice shook at first, but soon it steadied. By the end of the evening, the table leaned toward her, listening intently. Across the room, Marcus watched with quiet pride. She was blooming. At dessert, a media executive asked pointedly, "Elena, may I ask, how are you managing with everything going on, with Adrian and the situation?" The room grew silent. It was the question everyone wanted to ask, but no one dared. Elena placed her hand gently on her belly, her voice soft yet resolute. "Life has tested me, but I refuse to let my child be born into weakness. I will stand, I will rise, and I will not let betrayal define me." The silence broke into applause, subtle at first, then stronger. These were people used to masks and lies, but Elena's raw honesty cut through the noise. By the time the dinner ended, several guests approached her with business cards and invitations. A philanthropist offered to connect her with a foundation board. A banker whispered about a project that needed someone with her vision. The same society that once turned its back on her was now opening its doors. As she stepped out into the night air, Elena felt a rush of something she hadn't known in months: power. Not the kind Adrian flaunted with flashy cars and hollow toasts. This was deeper. Earned. Marcus walked beside her, his voice low. Do you see it now? You don't need Adrian's name. You never did. You are more than his wife. You are Elena Carter, and they are beginning to see that. Elena exhaled, her eyes lifting toward the city skyline. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was re-entering the game. And soon, Adrian Cole would realize the woman he threw away was now a force he could never compete with. The invitations were embossed in gold, sealed with wax, and delivered only to the most influential names in the city. The Blackwell Foundation Gala wasn't just another charity event. It was the event. Deals were made in whispers over champagne, reputations were cemented under chandeliers, and anyone who was anyone fought for a place on the guest list. Adrian Cole had been waiting for this night. For weeks, he and Sienna plotted their grand entrance. She spent hours with designers, choosing a crimson gown that would make her look like living fire. He practiced speeches in front of the mirror, rehearsing every smile, every gesture. To them, this gala wasn't just about charity. It was about proving they were the new power couple, the king and queen of New York's elite. On the night of the event, the flash of cameras outside the venue was blinding. Reporters shouted Adrian's name, eager for quotes. Sienna clung to his arm, her smile dazzling, her every movement choreographed for maximum effect. Together, they looked unstoppable. Inside the ballroom, chandeliers glittered over a sea of gowns and tuxedos. The air was thick with perfume, champagne bubbles, and ambition. Adrian thrived in it. He shook hands with politicians, laughed with investors, and introduced Sienna to anyone who mattered. He loved the way eyes followed them, how whispers rippled through the crowd. She's stunning. He's really moved on, hasn't he? They're the couple to watch. Every murmur inflated his ego. He thought he had won. At one point, Adrian raised a glass, commanding attention. To new beginnings, he declared, his voice booming. To the future we create when we dare to leave the past behind. The crowd cheered, and Sienna leaned in to kiss his cheek. Cameras flashed, immortalizing the moment. For Adrian, it was perfect. For Sienna, it was a victory lap. But while they basked in their carefully staged spotlight, something else stirred at the edges of the gala. Whispers spread, subtle at first, then stronger. Heads turned toward the entrance. The doors of the ballroom opened, and an unexpected presence began to shift the energy of the room. Adrian noticed the shift, but dismissed it. He was too caught up in his own glory. They're looking at us, he whispered smugly to Sienna. She giggled, convinced the same. But they were wrong. A hush fell as conversations faltered. Guests began murmuring to one another, their eyes fixed not on the self-proclaimed power couple, but on the figure stepping gracefully into the ballroom. Sienna frowned, following their gaze. Adrian turned, irritation flashing across his face. Who could possibly be stealing our moment, he muttered, and then he froze. For there, at the entrance, stood the woman he thought he had erased, the woman he had humiliated, discarded, abandoned. Elena Carter. She was radiant, dressed in a flowing midnight blue gown that shimmered under the chandeliers. Her pregnancy was visible, but it didn't diminish her presence, it enhanced it, transforming her into a vision of strength and grace. She moved with quiet confidence, her head high, her every step measured and unshaken. Gasps rippled through the room. Is that Adrian's wife? She looks incredible. I thought she was gone. Adrian's face turned pale, his smirk collapsing into shock. Sienna's hand tightened around his arm, but even she couldn't hide her unease. The spotlight they had fought so hard to claim had been stolen in an instant, and Adrian Cole realized with dread that the past he tried to bury had just walked back into his world, stronger, bolder, and untouchable. The ballroom seemed to inhale when Elena appeared, as though the glittering chandeliers themselves had paused to witness her return. The hush spread like wildfire, silencing laughter, muting conversation, turning heads until all eyes fixed on the woman no one expected to see. Elena Carter. She walked slowly, gracefully, her midnight blue gown catching the light with every step. She didn't rush, didn't stumble. She let the stairs wash over her like a tide, unbothered, almost regal. For months she had lived in shadows, invisible. Tonight, she owned the room. Her hand rested gently on her belly, not as a sign of weakness, but of strength. She carried her child openly, unapologetically, as though daring anyone to call her less. And the crowd, people who once pitied her, mocked her, could only gape. Adrian's throat went dry. His glass of champagne trembled in his hand, threatening to spill. "What the hell is she doing here?" he muttered, his voice hoarse. Sienna forced a smile, her nails digging into his arm. "Ignore her. She's trying to make a scene." But Elena didn't look at them. She didn't need to. Her eyes scanned the room with calm precision, landing instead on Marcus Blackwood, who stood waiting near the VIP section. His nod was small, subtle, but it gave her the courage to take the final steps. When she reached the velvet rope, the guard standing there didn't hesitate. He lifted it and bowed slightly. "Good evening, Mrs. Carter. Right this way." Gasps echoed. Murmurs rose. Mrs. Carter? Not Mrs. Cole. Not the discarded wife. Her name, her identity, her power. Elena stepped into the VIP section, the most exclusive corner of the gala, where deals were signed, alliances forged, and only the truly untouchable were allowed. The very section Adrian had tried to enter earlier in the evening, only to be politely denied. Adrian's face burned crimson. He shoved his glass onto a passing tray and stormed toward the rope, dragging Sienna behind him. "There must be some mistake," he barked at the guard. "I belong in there." The guard's expression remained professional, but his words sliced Adrian's ego to ribbons. "I'm sorry, Mr. Cole. Your name is not on the list." Adrian's jaw clenched. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes, sir," the guard replied evenly. "Which is why I must insist you step back. This area is reserved." The crowd watched with thinly veiled delight. Whispers grew sharper. "She's in VIP? He's not? This is unbelievable." Maybe she wasn't the weak one after all. Elena heard it all, but she didn't flinch. She sat at a round table draped in white linen, Marcus at her side, other power players leaning in to greet her warmly. She lifted her glass of sparkling water, her smile serene. For the first time, Adrian realized he wasn't just losing control of the narrative, he was losing control of the entire room. The attention that once fed his pride now belonged to Elena. Sienna tugged at his arm, whispering urgently, "Adrian, people are staring. Let's just go." But he couldn't move. He stood frozen, watching the wife he had called baggage command the spotlight with effortless grace. And in that moment, Adrian Cole understood a brutal truth. The woman he discarded had just become untouchable, in a section of the world he could no longer reach. Adrian Cole had never known the sting of humiliation like this. For years, he had been the man who commanded attention with a single glance, who strutted into rooms certain the spotlight belonged to him. But tonight, the very world he once ruled had slipped through his fingers. And the person who stole it wasn't a rival CEO or some rising politician. It was Elena, the wife he had abandoned, the woman he thought he had destroyed. He couldn't stand it. As Elena laughed softly at something Marcus whispered in the VIP section, Adrian's blood boiled. Every smile she gave, every nod of acknowledgement from the city's elite, felt like a knife carving away at his pride. He clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. "She doesn't belong there," he muttered to Sienna. "She's nothing without me." But the evidence before him told a different story. Elena sat radiant, her presence commanding, while powerful men and women leaned closer to hear her every word. Her name, Elena Carter, buzzed through the crowd like electricity. She was no longer the forgotten wife, she was the center of gravity. Adrian couldn't let it stand. He stormed toward one of the organizers, a portly man in a crisp tuxedo. "There's been a mistake," Adrian hissed. "My wife, ex-wife, whatever you call her, she shouldn't be in there. I demand you remove her." The organizer blinked, flustered, then leaned in with a whisper that made Adrian's face darken. "Mr. Cole, Mrs. Carter was personally invited by the Blackwood family. She is a guest of honor tonight. I'm afraid there's nothing I can do." "Guest of honor?" Adrian spat. "Her? She's a nobody." But even as the words left his mouth, he knew how hollow they sounded. No one was treating Elena like a nobody anymore. Sienna tugged on his sleeve, trying to calm him. "Adrian, stop. You're drawing attention." "I want attention." He snapped. "They need to see who's in charge here." He straightened his jacket and marched toward the velvet rope again, ignoring the guard's warning. "Move aside," he barked. The guard's voice was firm. "Mr. Cole, please don't make this difficult. I built this city. I made this company. She's nothing without me," Adrian shouted, his voice carrying across the ballroom. The room went still. Dozens of eyes turned toward him, not with admiration but with disdain. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Pathetic. He's losing it. Look at her, she doesn't even need to respond. And indeed, Elena remained seated in the VIP section, serene as ever. She didn't rise, didn't shout back. Her silence was louder than Adrian's tantrum. She sipped her sparkling water and smiled faintly, as though his rage were beneath her notice. Adrian's chest heaved. For the first time he realized that his desperation wasn't intimidating anyone. It was entertaining them. He had become the spectacle, the joke. Sienna leaned in, her voice sharp with embarrassment. "Adrian, please, you're making us look ridiculous." He turned on her, his face twisted with fury. "This is your fault. You said she was finished. You said she wouldn't dare show her face again." Sienna recoiled, her mask of confidence cracking. People gasped at his public outburst, whispers multiplying. The once untouchable CEO was unraveling before their eyes. The guard stepped forward, his tone final. "Sir, I'll have to ask you to step back immediately, or you will be escorted out." Adrian froze, his pride battling against reality. But the damage was done. His desperate attempts had failed, and the crowd had witnessed his fall. And as Elena sat calmly in the VIP section, the truth settled like ice in his veins. He hadn't just lost control of the night. He had lost control of the narrative forever. Sienna Vale had always been careful. Her entire career was built on appearances. How she looked, how she moved, how she attached herself to the right people at the right time. For months, Adrian Cole had been her golden ticket. Wealthy, rising in influence, willing to flaunt her at every event. But now, as she stood in the ballroom watching him unravel in front of New York's elite, her instincts screamed one truth. He was no longer an asset. He was a liability. The whispers cut through the music like knives. "He's lost his mind. Pathetic display. Did you see the wife? She outshines him by miles." Sienna's carefully painted smile faltered. She glanced at Adrian, red-faced and trembling with rage, shouting at guards who refused him entry to the VIP section. He looked nothing like the powerful man she had clung to. He looked desperate, weak, and weakness was contagious. "Adrian, please," she hissed under her breath, gripping his arm. "Stop this. You're embarrassing both of us." He shook her off, his eyes wild. "Don't tell me what to do. You said she was finished, Sienna. You promised me she wouldn't dare show her face again." The words were loud enough for those nearby to hear. Gasps and murmurs spread. Sienna's cheeks burned, not with shame, but with fury. How dare he drag her down with him? She quickly scanned the room. Photographers were still circling. Investors whispered in clusters. And Elena sat in the VIP section, glowing like a queen, every bit the woman of dignity Sienna could never mimic. For the first time, Sienna realized the tide had turned. The crowd was no longer fascinated by her. They were fascinated by Elena, and Sienna hated it. She plastered on her brightest smile and leaned close to Adrian, her voice sharp behind her teeth. "You're finished, Adrian. You just don't see it yet, and I won't go down with you." Adrian blinked at her, stunned. "What are you saying?" She slipped her hand from his arm, stepping away as though his touch carried poison. "I'm saying this, whatever this is, doesn't work for me anymore. I didn't sign up to play nursemaid to a man falling apart." The crowd saw it. They saw the glamorous model peel herself away from the once powerful CEO. Whispers grew louder. Phones discreetly recorded the scene. Adrian reached for her hand, desperation leaking from every pore. "Sienna, wait, don't do this. Not now." She laughed, cold and sharp. "Not now, Adrian? Look around you. Everyone's laughing. At you. And if I stay, they'll laugh at me too. I told you. I don't stand next to losers." The words hit harder than any blow. Adrian staggered as if she had slapped him. His mouth opened, but no sound came. Sienna flipped her hair over her shoulder, her crimson gown flowing behind her like a final curtain. "Good luck, darling," she said with mocking sweetness. "You'll need it." And just like that, she walked away, out of his reach, out of his life, leaving him surrounded by the pitying stares of the very people he had once tried to impress. For a man like Adrian, who thrived on control and image, it was a death blow. He had lost his wife, lost his mistress, and lost his dignity in one night. And as Elena's calm smile shone from the VIP section, the message was clear. Adrian Cole's empire of pride was crumbling, and there was nothing left for him to hold on to. The gala was already buzzing with shock over Adrian's humiliation and Sienna's cold exit. But the evening had one more revelation waiting, one that would rewrite everything people thought they knew about Elena Carter. It began with a speech. Toward the end of dinner, Marcus Blackwood rose from his seat in the VIP section. His reputation alone commanded silence, and the crowd quickly stilled as he lifted his glass. "Tonight," Marcus began, his deep voice steady, "we celebrate not just generosity, but resilience. And there's someone here whose strength deserves to be recognized." Elena froze. Her heart thudded in her chest as Marcus turned toward her. She shook her head slightly, but he only smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to properly reintroduce Elena Carter." Applause rippled across the room, hesitant at first, then stronger as Marcus continued. "Some of you may know her only as the wife cast aside by a man too blind to see her worth. But what many of you don't know is that Elena is the daughter of the late Thomas Carter, a man whose vision and integrity shaped much of the city we live in." Gasps filled the ballroom. Elena's name suddenly carried weight. People whispered furiously. "Thomas Carter? The Carter legacy?" Marcus pressed on, his eyes steady on Elena's. Her father entrusted his legacy not to corporations or boardrooms, but to his daughter, a woman with both heart and strength. She chose a quieter path, away from wealth and spotlight, but make no mistake, Elena Carter is not a victim. She is a force. Elena's cheeks burned as the crowd erupted into applause again. Some people even stood, raising their glasses toward her. She wanted to shrink, to hide, but another part of her, the part that had been growing stronger each day, lifted her chin instead. Across the ballroom, Adrian's face drained of color. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched at his sides. He had spent years treating Elena like dead weight, blind to the truth. And now the truth stood illuminated under the chandeliers for the entire world to see. Whispers reached his ears like daggers. "She's Carter's daughter?" He threw that away. Unbelievable. For Adrian, it was worse than humiliation. It was exposure. He had built his pride on the idea that he had outgrown her, that she was beneath him. But now, everyone knew he had married power and grace, and then discarded it for vanity. Meanwhile, Elena rose slowly from her seat. Her hands trembled, but her voice when she spoke was clear. "My father taught me that true strength isn't measured by wealth or titles, but by resilience. I may have been broken, but I will not remain broken. I will rise, for myself and for my child." Tears welled in her eyes, but she did not falter. The room burst into thunderous applause, echoing through the grand hall like a symphony of justice. Adrian stood frozen in the crowd, his world unraveling piece by piece. The wife he discarded was not just surviving, she was rising higher than he could ever reach. And in that moment, Adrian realized the cruelest twist of all. The woman he had treated as baggage was the very foundation he could never live without. The applause thundered around her, but Elena barely heard it. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stood in the center of the VIP section, the eyes of New York's most powerful fixed on her. For months she had been silenced, humiliated, reduced to nothing. Tonight, she had a voice again. Marcus gave her a subtle nod, encouraging her to speak. Elena swallowed hard, her hand resting protectively on her belly. She hadn't planned for this moment. She had no speech prepared. All she had was her truth. She stepped forward, her voice trembling at first. I didn't expect to speak tonight. For a long time, I didn't think I deserved to be seen or heard at all. I thought my story ended the night my husband chose someone else over me." A hush fell. Even the waiters paused, frozen mid-step. Elena drew a shaky breath and continued, her words flowing from the deepest part of her pain. "I gave up my career, my dreams to build a life with him. I believed in him when no one else did. I stood by him when we had nothing. I thought that love and loyalty were enough." Her voice cracked and she pressed her hand to her chest. "But when I needed him most, when I was carrying his child, he looked at me as if I were a burden. He told me I no longer fit into his world. He paraded another woman in front of me, as though I had never existed." Gasps rippled through the audience. Adrian shifted uncomfortably at the back of the room, every word slicing at his pride. Tears welled in Elena's eyes, but she didn't shy away from them. "That betrayal broke me. It crushed every part of who I thought I was, and there were nights I believed I wouldn't survive it. But then," she lowered her gaze to her belly, "I heard my child's heartbeat, and I realized I wasn't fighting just for myself anymore. I was fighting for the little life inside me, a life that deserved a mother who could stand strong." The room was silent, hanging on her every word. Some women dabbed at their eyes. Men shifted, ashamed, as if Adrian's cruelty reflected their own failures. Elena lifted her chin, her voice steady now. I may not have wealth in my hands. I may not have a perfect image to sell. But what I have is resilience, and I will not allow betrayal to define me. I will not disappear. Not for him, not for anyone. My child will grow up knowing that their mother refused to bow to humiliation, that she stood back up, even when the world wanted her to stay down. By the time she finished, her cheeks were streaked with tears, but they were tears of strength, not weakness. The ballroom erupted in applause, louder than before. People rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, moved by her raw honesty. In that moment, Elena was no longer the abandoned wife. She was a symbol of survival, of dignity, of the kind of courage that transcends luxury and power. Adrian stood frozen, his jaw tight, his fists clenched, as the crowd embraced the woman he had thrown away. The louder they clapped, the smaller he felt. And as Elena wiped her tears and smiled through the applause, she knew the tide had turned. The world was no longer laughing at her. It was standing with her. The applause for Elena felt like thunder crashing against Adrian's chest. Each clap was another nail in the coffin of the image he had built. He stood frozen at the edge of the ballroom, his face pale, his jaw clenched, while the woman he had dismissed as baggage was celebrated like royalty. He tried to laugh it off, forcing a smirk. She's just putting on a show, he muttered to no one in particular. But no one around him nodded. No one agreed. The same investors who once flocked to his side avoided his gaze. The same colleagues who had praised his ambition whispered behind their hands, shaking their heads. One of his biggest backers, a gray-haired real estate mogul, stepped closer with a cold smile. Adrian, I can't be associated with this kind of drama. It's bad for business. With that, he turned and walked away. Another followed. Then another. Adrian's chest tightened. He reached for a glass of champagne from a passing tray, but his hand trembled so badly that the liquid sloshed onto the floor. He looked around desperately for Sienna, the woman he had traded everything for. But she was gone, swept away into the crowd, or perhaps already on the arm of someone else more promising. The whispers grew sharper, slicing through his pride. He humiliated her, and now look, she's stronger without him. His empire won't survive this. He stormed toward a group of board members, his voice low and urgent. You know me. You know what I've built. Don't let this spectacle change anything. But one of them, a man who had once praised Adrian's vision, shook his head. It's not about what you built. It's about who you've become. And right now, you're poison. The words hit harder than any physical blow. Adrian staggered back, his breath shallow. He tried to collect himself, but the truth was undeniable. His allies were abandoning him. His reputation was crumbling in real time. And then came the final blow. A reporter, bold enough to cut through the tension, stepped forward with a microphone. Mr. Cole, how does it feel knowing that your wife, whom you discarded, is now being hailed as a symbol of resilience while your own image is under fire? The crowd turned, eager for his response. Adrian's mouth opened, but no words came. His voice, his greatest weapon, failed him. He stood there, mute, while cameras flashed, capturing his humiliation for tomorrow's headlines. Elena, seated in the VIP section, didn't even look his way. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any speech, her calm presence, the ultimate rebuke. Adrian finally snapped, his voice cracking as he shouted, "She's nothing without me, nothing." But the crowd recoiled. The anger in his tone only confirmed what everyone already suspected, that Adrian Cole wasn't a leader, but a coward hiding behind arrogance. Security moved closer, ready to intervene if his outburst escalated. Adrian realized it too late. He had become the villain of the night, the man no one wanted to be near. By the time he stumbled out of the ballroom, his tie loosened, his pride in shreds. The whispers followed him like shadows. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Messages from investors pulling out, deals collapsing, contracts canceled. His empire wasn't just cracking. It was falling apart. For Adrian Cole, the collapse had begun, and as the doors closed behind him, one truth settled like ice in his chest. Elena hadn't just survived without him. She was thriving, while he was being erased. When Sienna Vale slipped away from Adrian's side at the gala, she thought she was saving herself. In her mind, she could cut ties quickly, spin the narrative, and latch on to the next powerful man willing to showcase her beauty. That was how she had survived in the cutthroat world of modeling, by moving fast and leaving no trace of loyalty behind. But this time, her escape wasn't seamless. The very cameras she had once loved caught everything. The flashbulbs immortalized her walking away from Adrian as he unraveled, her crimson gown billowing like a banner of betrayal. By morning, those images were plastered across gossip columns and social media. Headlines screamed, "CEO loses control, model girlfriend walks away." Sienna Vale, opportunist or survivor, beauty turns her back on falling mogul. The internet devoured her. What once had been admiration turned sour. Commenters tore her apart, calling her heartless, disloyal, a gold digger who abandoned Adrian the moment his empire wobbled. Sponsors who once courted her pulled out quietly, citing brand concerns. Fashion houses stopped returning her calls. But the worst was yet to come. A well-connected journalist, digging into the story, uncovered details Sienna had fought to bury. The sugar daddies who funded her early career, the married executives she had strategically entangled herself with, the trail of scandals she left in her climb. For years she had kept those skeletons locked away. Now, with the world turning against her, the closet burst open. Her phone buzzed non-stop, not with offers but with threats, with photographers camping outside her apartment, with agents dropping her one by one. Within days, she was no longer Sienna, the rising star. She was Sienna, the scandal. Her anger boiled over in her luxury penthouse, the one Adrian had rented for her. She hurled a glass across the room, watching it shatter against the marble. "This isn't fair," she screamed to the empty walls. But fairness had never been part of her game. She had built her life on illusion, and illusions collapse quickly when the spotlight turns harsh. Desperate, she called Adrian, hoping to reconcile, to remind him that they had once been a team. But Adrian didn't answer. He was drowning in his own ruin, and even if he had picked up, there was nothing left he could offer her. So Sienna tried to attend a fashion launch, her last chance to prove she still belonged. Cameras flashed as she stepped onto the carpet, but instead of cheers, she was met with jeers. "There she is, the traitor. Smile for us, Sienna. Show us how fast you can run from failure." Her face burned as she pushed past the crowd, but inside the venue, the humiliation was worse. No one wanted to speak to her. Chairs pulled away, conversations hushed when she walked by. She was poison, just like Adrian. Back in her apartment that night, Sienna stared at her reflection in the mirror. The woman who looked back was still beautiful, but beauty meant nothing without power. For the first time, she saw herself clearly, not as the glamorous model the world once adored, but as a cautionary tale. She whispered bitterly, "Maybe Elena was right. Men like Adrian don't change, they just trade mistakes. And this time, I was the mistake." The truth cut deeper than the headlines ever could. And as her phone went silent, contracts canceled, friends vanished, Sienna realized she hadn't just lost Adrian, she had lost the world she fought so ruthlessly to build. The storm had passed. Adrian's empire lay in ruins, Sienna's career reduced to ashes, and the whispers that once mocked Elena now praised her resilience. But for Elena Carter, victory wasn't about watching others fall. It was about standing tall for herself, for her child, and for the future she was ready to embrace. Weeks after the gala, Elena attended another event, this time by her own choice. It wasn't about society or spectacle. It was a charity fundraiser for single mothers, a cause that now lived in her heart. As she stepped onto the stage to deliver the keynote, the room greeted her with applause. Not the polite clapping reserved for appearances, but a heartfelt welcome born of respect. She placed her notes aside. She didn't need them. Her story was already etched in every fiber of her being. "I once believed my worth depended on someone else's love," Elena began, her voice clear, steady. "I thought that if I sacrificed enough, supported enough, gave enough, I would be safe. But life taught me a different lesson. Love that demands you shrink yourself is not love, it's a cage." The audience leaned in, many nodding, some with tears brimming in their eyes. "I was humiliated, abandoned, and told I was nothing. But in the silence of those nights, when I thought I couldn't go on, I heard another voice. The heartbeat of my child. That sound reminded me that I wasn't finished. That I couldn't be finished. Because someone depended on me to rise again." Her hand brushed her belly gently, and the room melted into quiet reverence. Tonight, I stand here not as a victim of betrayal, but as proof that women are not fragile ornaments to be replaced when convenient. We are iron wrapped in grace. We bend, but we do not break. And when we rise stronger than before. The applause swelled, filling the hall like a wave. Alina smiled, tears glistening but refusing to fall. She had cried enough. These were not tears of sorrow, they were the shine of triumph. Marcus, standing in the wings, watched with pride. He had helped her rebuild, but it was Elena who had chosen to rise. She had walked through fire and emerged unscathed, not because someone saved her, but because she discovered her own strength. As the event concluded, women approached her, one after another, thanking her for her words, for her courage. Some shared their own stories of betrayal, of abandonment, of finding strength. Elena listened, embraced them, and felt the heavy chains of her past finally loosen. Outside, the cameras still flashed, but she no longer feared them. This time, they weren't there to capture her humiliation, they were there to capture her light. Meanwhile, Adrian lurked in obscurity, a man once invited to every table, now struggling to secure a seat anywhere. Sienna drifted into silence, her name mentioned only as a cautionary whisper. They had both written her off as powerless, they had both been wrong. As Elena left the event, she paused under the night sky, her hand resting on her belly once more. She whispered softly, "We made it, and from here, we'll only go higher." The city lights sparkled like stars, reflecting in her eyes. She was no longer the woman discarded in the shadows. She was a survivor, a mother, a symbol of strength, and her story carried a message the world would not forget. Betrayal may break you, but resilience will rebuild you. And when you rise unstoppable. So that's how our story comes to a close. My dear friends, you're still here with me at this moment, aren't you? And if you've stayed until now, it means something in this journey has touched your heart in its own quiet way. Maybe it reminded you of your own struggles. Maybe it showed you that even in betrayal and heartbreak, there's a strength inside us that no one can take away. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Elena's story is proof of that truth. She could not control Adrian's betrayal or Sienna's cruelty, but she could choose how to rise from it, and she did. Stronger, braver, untouchable. And that's the lesson for all of us. Pain is real, but it doesn't define us. What defines us is how we stand up again, not just for ourselves, but for those we love. If this story spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who needs the reminder, and subscribe to our channel so we can keep walking this journey together. Because you are not alone, and you are stronger than you know.